Deep in the Tennessee forests, there was a popular camping site. This site, called Shady Pines, had been a favorite for nature lovers and vacationers for years. However, in recent years, strange events started to occur in the campsite. Tents were disappearing, campfires were mysteriously extinguished by morning, and some campers reported hearing terrifying sounds during the night. John, Sarah, and a few of their friends decided to ignore these warnings and head to the area. They were just looking to escape the city for a few days and enjoy the great outdoors. On their first day, the weather was beautiful and the forest appeared calm. One evening, they decided to set up camp and light a fire. The air was growing colder, and Sarah, sitting by the fire, was gazing up at the stars. John had wandered off a bit to check around the area. Suddenly, Sarah heard a strange rustling noise coming from deep within the forest. At first, she thought it was just the wind, but the sound kept growing louder, followed by a metallic clanging sound. "John, is that you?" she called out, but received no response. Minutes passed, and the sound continued to approach, but no one was in sight. Her gaze shifted toward the area where their tents were set up. She saw a figure moving near one of the tents. The figure was only a silhouette in the dim light, but it was unmistakably moving, circling around the tent. Who could it be? With the flickering light from the fire, the silhouette became clearer. The person seemed to be rummaging through the inside of a tent. At that moment, Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. John returned. "What's wrong? Why are you out here?" he asked, looking slightly uneasy. Sarah shook her head. "Someone's in one of the tents over there," she said quietly. John's eyes widened. "There's only us here," he replied, but Sarah was still on edge. She stared at the area where the figure had been, but it was now empty. "I don't want to see this anymore," Sarah said, her voice trembling. "We need to leave." Despite their fears, they decided to stay the night. But something felt deeply wrong. Throughout the night, strange things kept happening. Footsteps, clanging metal noises, and the figure of someone moving near their tents. They tried to sleep but couldn't. The next morning, they discovered strange tracks around their tents. These tracks didn't belong to any human or animal. Yet someone had clearly been watching them during the night. A few days later, another group of campers disappeared. Their tents were gone, just like the previous group. As the events unfolded, more people began leaving the campsite. However, John, Sarah, and their friends refused to leave. They were frightened, but what was really going on? Nobody knew for sure. Then one morning, something more terrifying was discovered. Inside one of the tents, there was a man lying dead, his eyes wide open and staring blankly. But the strangest part was that his body showed no signs of decomposition. He was just lifeless, his eyes vacant. Campsite officials later quarantined the area and began an official investigation. However, no one could figure out exactly what had happened. After that day, Shady Pines was abandoned and nothing was ever built on that land again. The last person to visit the campsite was John. Years later, he decided to return alone. To this day, no one knows why Shady Pines was abandoned. But the missing campers and the horrifying stories that followed remain in the mouths of the town's residents. Now, the place stands as an abandoned, dark, and terrifying land. As dusk approached, Allison and three of her friends decided to explore a mysterious trail surrounded by dense forest. It was the first warm summer evening of the year, and venturing deep into the woods seemed like the perfect adventure for a few days. As they walked together, the group heard almost no sound other than the natural noises and the faint rustling of leaves carried by a gentle breeze. But as they ventured deeper into the forest, even the sound of their footsteps began to fade. Each one of them had a different personality. Allison, always cautious and logical, was an experienced camper. Jason, the fun and brave one, never lost his cheerfulness no matter what. Lily, quiet and introverted, was just as observant. Lastly, Michael, the youngest and most energetic, was always seeking adventure. At first, everything seemed normal. They slowly descended deeper into the woods, convinced they were near a good place to camp. But as they continued down the trail, something started to feel off. The farther they went, each of them began to feel the need to glance behind them, as if something was watching them. But there was nothing. Nothing at all. By the time night fell, they found a clearing where they decided to set up camp. However, the forest, which had previously been silent, now seemed to be pressing in on them. The trees appeared to be staring at them. Everyone felt uneasy, but thinking it was just the natural feeling of being in the woods, they lit a campfire and began to fight off the darkness surrounding them. After eating, a brief conversation took place before silence fell over the group. Shortly after, Jason murmured that he felt disturbed by the shadows dancing around the campfire. "It's like someone is walking around us," he muttered, but no one really paid much attention. Suddenly, Michael got up and started running towards something. "There's someone!" he screamed. Everyone jumped to their feet, but Michael had already disappeared down the path. He had run so fast that no one could figure out what had happened. Then, in a panic, everyone else ran after Michael into the forest. But the further they went, the more they realized something strange. The trail was leading them in circles. No matter how far they ventured, they couldn't tell where they were or where the path was taking them. The trees always looked the same, and everything seemed to remain unchanged. An hour later, they returned to the campsite, but there was still no sign of Michael. The only thing left was a piece of the campfire that had begun to burn out. Everyone was now convinced that there was something in the forest watching them, waiting patiently to feed on their fears. Michael was never seen again.